I hate to break it to you, but my girlfriend who's 20 years younger is pregnant. I prefer younger girls, so I'm getting a divorce. Is that okay with you? If you do decide to get a divorce, please take good care of our son. Have you spoiled him enough already? Unfortunately, I cannot take him with me because he is my son. I kept quiet at that moment, hoping this conversation would stay between us. However, Ken must have overheard us from his place in the room. What would he think if he heard this? That was my only concern. I must speak up, or else this man will not understand the gravity of the situation. That is too selfish, and I will not stand for it. Just as our happiness was taken away, I want to take his away too. Fueled by these emotions, I decided to confront Ted with a shocking truth. My name is Mila Davis, and I am 41 years old. I am married to Ted, and we have a son, Ken, who's a high school junior. We got married 13 years ago when I was 28. At that time, I was working as an insurance saleswoman, visiting various companies to sell insurance. That's when I met Ted. He was working at a local import-export business and had just divorced his wife. He told me my wife cheated on me and left me. Now I'm living with my 5-year-old son, just the two of us, and it's pretty lonely. He looked somewhat sorrowful as he shared this with me. Every time I visited Ted's company for work, we would talk, and eventually, he asked me if I wanted to go out together. However, we never went out just the two of us because Ted always brought his son Ken along. He couldn't leave him at home alone, right? He then said, "I'd really love for you to be my son's new mom, but I guess you wouldn't want to marry a man with a child." Seeing him like that, I thought he truly cherished his child. If he could care for a child like that, then surely he would care for his family. So I decided to marry Ted. But it turns out, it was all a performance to marry me. In fact, as soon as we got married, Ted changed. I quit my job and became a housewife, taking care of the household and our child. That wasn't a problem, but Ted started neglecting Ken. Before our marriage, he even brought Ken along on our dates. But after we got married, he stopped paying attention to Ken. Not just on weekdays, but even on weekends, Ted never talked to Ken. He never took Ken out anywhere, never played with him, nothing. Even after Ken started elementary school, Ted's attitude towards him didn't change. I went to all of Ken's school events alone, and he totally ignored all events that parents should join and enjoy together. You could at least attend some of the school events with Ken. When I said that, Ted made a grimace. After that, he sighed in annoyance and said, "Sorry, but I'm just tired from work." But oh, be quiet. Taking care of our son is your job as his mother, right? Just do it properly. And with that, he shouted and ended the conversation. What happened to the man I knew before we got married? I felt a twinge of regret. Then, one day, Ken had just come home from elementary school and was helping me prepare dinner. Suddenly, a message from Ted arrived on my phone. Wait, what? He's bringing his subordinates home from now on. Apparently, he was going to bring several colleagues home. Ted had just been promoted to team leader, so he probably wanted to deepen his relationship with his new subordinates. What should I do? We don't have any food stored. They would surely end up drinking at our home. And if that's the case, we'll need some snacks. It's not even an hour's drive from the office to our home. After some thought, I decided to go to the nearby supermarket to buy some ingredients. When I got home, I started cooking in a hurry. "I'll help too." "Oh, thank you. Then, could you please get the dishes ready?" We prepared as hard as we could, but there were limits. Ted arrived home when only about half of the preparations were done. "I'm home." "Hey, I brought my colleagues," Ted shouted at the entrance. I greeted them briefly and led them to the room. Then I served them beer and snacks. As I was thinking about preparing the next dish, Ted came into the kitchen and asked me, "Hey, what's happening with the food?" "I'm cooking right now. There are snacks, so it should be okay for now. What have you been doing?" "I told you in advance. If you can notify me a bit earlier." "Stop complaining. You should have this ready." "Do you want me to be embarrassed?" I was shouted at and was left speechless. Of course, there were countless things I wanted to rebut, but the sound in the kitchen could be heard in the living room. The guests must have felt uncomfortable too. Thinking so, I couldn't say anything in response. In the end, I just silently endured our guests. But once the guests had left, I had a big fight with Ted. I was angry at Ted for shouting at me, just because of his own convenience. Then Ted puckered his lips and said in a childish manner, "Okay, fine. I'll have a party in some venues from now on." No. After that, Ted started to hang out more. His spending became more extravagant, and he would often leave early on his days off. By then, Ken had become a 7th grade student, and it started costing money for things like after-school programs. That's when I talked to Ted about wanting to start a part-time job. "A part-time job?" he asked. "Do you want money for leisure?" I quickly clarified that it was for things like Ken's tuition for the after-school programs. Sid, who was possibly drunk, gave a careless response. Despite this, I got his word and began a part-time job as an insurance agent. I asked a former boss from the company I worked at before marriage to make me a part-time employee, hoping it would make things easier. However, Ted complained, and I couldn't slack off on housework. I had limited time to work and had to prepare dinner before Ted got home, but I managed my time well and kept working. One day, I accidentally let work run late and hurried home, only to find Ted already there. As soon as he saw me, he asked with a sullen face, "Where have you been?" I replied, "I was at my part-time job." Ted's suspicious eyes bore into me as he asked, "Part-time job? You aren't cheating on me, were you?" I firmly denied it, but he continued to look at me with suspicion. Just as I was wondering what to do, Ted reached for my smartphone and said, "Let me see. I'll check if there are any men's names." I tried to stop him, but he forcefully snatched my phone and began checking the contacts. He quickly found my boss's name and asked, "Who's this?" When I explained that he was my boss, Ted accused, "He's your lover, isn't he?" Before I could react, Ted dialed my boss's number. I pleaded with him to stop, but he ignored me. Thankfully, the misunderstanding was cleared up quickly, and I apologized profusely to my boss. I urged Ted to do the same, but he simply looked away and blamed me for making it seem like I was doing something wrong. Since then, our relationship has gone downhill. Even when Ken became a 9th grader, nothing changed. I couldn't help but wonder if it was okay to continue this relationship, but I couldn't think of a way to fix it. Before I knew it, Ken was a senior in high school, preparing for college. Lately, things between Ted and I had become completely cold. We hardly ever argued at home anymore. At least it wouldn't affect Ken's studies. Things can stay like this until Ken enters college. That's what I thought. Then, one day, I had to go near Ted's workplace for my job. If things were good between us, I'd invite him to lunch. As I muttered this, I spotted Ted's car across the intersection. Wait, is that Ted with who? As I squinted, I saw 2 people laughing and chatting. The word infidelity flashed in my mind. Accusing others of infidelity while doing it yourself. Thread a joke. I was too stunned to say anything. I secretly took a picture of them and went to a private detective to ask them to investigate Ted. I probably already know the answer. The thought crossed my mind. The idea of divorce was already set in my mind. But evidence is crucial in these matters, so I waited for the results of the investigation. About a month later, the results arrived. They were damning. He really had the nerve. Just divorcing didn't seem enough anymore. How should I get back at him? As if on a certain day off. Lost in my thoughts, Ted, who was supposed to be out, came home unexpectedly soon. Rushing over to me, he exclaimed, "I'm sorry, but my girlfriend, who's 20 years younger, is pregnant." Riders licked maize. I couldn't believe my ears. But there he was, a smirk on his face, declaring, "So yeah, my girlfriend who's 20 years younger is pregnant. I prefer younger women, so I'm gonna divorce you. That's fine, right?" Well, he certainly had the guts to confess his affair himself. However, I saw this as an opportunity. With this in mind, I decided to seize the moment. "Go ahead and get married. But please take care of our son," I said with a smile on my face, which seemed to catch Ted off guard. "What? You should take our son with you. You've always been so fond of him." "I don't want to," I continued, carefully choosing my words, "because that boy who is studying in his room, should be able to hear me. What would he think if he heard this?" That was my only concern. That being said, if I don't stand up to him now, he won't understand the gravity of the situation. I won't let that happen. I want to snatch away his happiness just like Iris was taken from us. Driven by these thoughts, I decided to confront Ted with a truth that would stun him. "I hate to break it to you, but isn't Ken your son?" He asked. "He's not mine." "What are you talking about? We're married, right? If we're married, then our child is our child, right?" Ted declared, looking smug. At that moment, I was at a loss for words. Is this guy an idiot? He's 4 years older than me, and he knows nothing. I was too stunned to say anything. Surprised at his lack of understanding, I exhaled deeply and hit Ted with the truth. "Ken is your child with your ex-wife, right? So what?" In other words, to me, Ken is your stepchild. I'd make a stepchild one's own. One must legally adopt them. Adoption? Ted furrowed his brow. Generally speaking, stepchildren remain just that, stepchildren. Good to act as a real parent. The only way is to adopt them legally. Without doing that, you can't have parental rights, and the child won't be legally recognized as yours. Of course, socially, they may be seen as your children. But there's no legal binding. A step-parent has no legal obligations, and a stepchild has no rights to the parent's inheritance. I didn't adopt Ken when I married you, Ted. That's why I can't take Ken with me. Wait, hold on. So, does that mean I have to take care of Ken? That seems to be the case. Although I wouldn't say you'd be charged with parental negligence just for leaving him alone. Still, Ken is a high school student, an age where parents are obligated to raise their children. In other words, it can be said that Ted can't just abandon him. Well, looking stunned, Ted pleads with me. Come on, that can't be right. What can't? I have a baby on the way. I plan to live with my newborn and my soon-to-be wife, just the three of us. That was the condition for marrying Ken. Oh, so the woman he cheated with is named Kay. So, that has nothing to do with me. It's got everything to do with you. This could all be resolved if you just take Ken. But I've told you, I can't, right? Just find a way. Please, don't ruin my happiness. He was begging. Don't ruin his happiness. I'm shocked at his audacity. After shattering our happiness, he doesn't get to demand his own happiness. With clenched teeth, I tell Ted, no matter what you say, what can't be done can't be done. You should ask your girlfriend, Kay. You're truly heartless. Fine, you'll regret this. Ted slammed the table and stood up. Then, as he picked up his cell phone, he walked out of the room. Following him with my gaze, I noticed him making a call in the hallway. That's why. Yeah, that's right. So I could hear his voice. Eventually, Ted came back and said to me, just find a way. Me, just wait. I'm bringing Kay over. Bring me. You bringing her here? Of course, because you're refusing to budge. I have no other choice. For some reason, Ted shouted angrily. It seemed like he didn't believe he was in the wrong. Well, we still have to discuss the division of property, and this might make things easier. With that thought, I quietly watched Ted leave. About an hour had passed since Ted left the house. He returned bringing a woman with him. As I stole a glance at her, she greeted me with a look of discontent. Hi, she said, not even attempting to meet my gaze. I can somewhat understand her feelings. Meeting the spouse of the person you're having an affair with, no matter how you think of it, cannot be a pleasant experience. Regardless, Kay turned out to be the woman who had been in Ted's car that day. I can't deny thinking it's all because of this woman. But thanks to this woman, I can bring Ted down to his lowest. Just with that thought, a smile naturally spilled onto my face. How should I start the conversation? While I was considering this, Kay spoke up first. You're Mila, right? Don't you think your child is adorable? You've lived together for about 13 years, haven't you? Are you talking about Ken? He asked. If so, I do think he's adorable. I consider him as much my child as if he were my own. Then why are you abandoning him? You should take him with you, Kay said. I stared at her, noticing sweat beginning to bead on her forehead. I knew it. She condemns me with her words, but she doesn't truly mean it. I recalled the results of the investigation into Ted's conduct. If current situation described there about Ken is true, it makes sense why she would argue like this. So I decided to shake things up. I'd love to take him with me, I said. But no matter how adorable he is, and no matter how much I love him, legally, only Ted is Ken's parent. I can't become Ken's parent. But Kay interjected, there's also the option of not getting a divorce. And you need to raise your child by yourself. Upon hearing this, Kay flinched. She then turned to Ted and said, I can't raise a baby on my own. Don't worry, I'll take care of our child. Besides, I'm definitely getting a divorce and I want to be with you. At that point, I interrupted, what are you talking about? It hasn't been decided whether we're getting a divorce yet. Shut up, Ted snapped. I'm definitely getting a divorce, so you're taking Ken with you. We'll discuss that later. We're heading nowhere. Kay, what do you think? I turned the conversation over to Kay. She made a pout and said, I can't raise someone else's child, even if it's the child of the man you love. Of course not. I love Ted, not some child of Ted and another woman. Oh, I see. But isn't your argument a bit strange? Why? You don't want to raise someone else's child. That's your personal opinion, and I won't blame you for it. But you're okay with making Ted raise another person's child, right? As soon as I said that, Kay's face turned suddenly pale. At the same time, Ted tilted his head. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the baby, Kay's baby in her belly. This child is mine. I told you that before. Sure, you did say that, But it's odd. And according to what I investigated, the father of Kay's child should be another man. As soon as I broke the news, Ted turned to Kay. With her face pale, Kay looked down and Ted stared at her. The whole scene was so ridiculous that I nearly burst into laughter. Then Ted interrogated Kay. Is what she said true? What? I mean, about the father of the child. Don't be stupid. Kay banged on the table to argue back, but I calmly told her that's not true. I have proof, look. Saying this, I laid out a single photo on the table. The picture showed Kay and an unknown man talking in front of an obstetrician's office. With a private investigation, they also check if you're cheating. According to that, you have a man you're seeing. The child in your belly. It's his, isn't it? Kay started to stutter, unable to speak. Seeing her like this, Ted seemed to have understood everything. He collapsed in despair. That's why you should divorce me and raise the child together. What, Ted? You'll be raising someone else's child. But Kay, you're okay with that, right? No way. Don't forget about Ken, okay? Wait, let's get back together, Mila. If I break up with her, you won't divorce, right? What? You're saying whatever suits you. Sorry, but I was also planning to divorce. So this comes at the right time. And I'll claim a hefty division of property. Saying so, I slammed their cheating evidence on the table. Spread out on the table were photos of the two of them cheating. Of course, there were also photos of Kay and the unknown man. Ted picked up one of the photos and shouted at Kay, "This is a lie." I should have thought more carefully. I would have preferred a younger man. I thought I could just take the money and end things if I had to take the child. Suddenly, Ted and Kay started fighting amongst themselves. Get up, I told them to take their fight somewhere else and kicked them out of the house. After that, I went to Ken's room. I gently knocked on the door and Ken peeked out. I'm sorry. You heard the conversation, didn't you? Well, yeah, but that was all in my dad. It's not like it's your fault or anything. But I'm totally fine, really. I'll be a college student next year, and I'll make my dad pay for the move and then do whatever I want. Ken flashed a slight smile. He seemed more mature than I had thought. I was relieved to see my son's growth. However, his father, Ted, has not matured at all. No matter how many times I tried to contact him, he stopped answering my calls. Even after a few days had passed, the situation remained unchanged. The divorce negotiations wouldn't proceed like this. And he doesn't seem to be coming home either. So troubled, I decided to go to Ted's company. But showing up suddenly might just be a nuisance. So I contacted Ted's boss, Mr. Wilson, before heading to his company. When I arrived at the company, Mr. Wilson promptly attended to me, and he summoned Ted to his office. At the same time, he also called for Kay. This with the two of them in front of me, I addressed Ted. You know why I'm here, right? What's it? Because you won't cooperate with the divorce discussions. How long you're planning to ignore this? As I spoke in a strong tone, Ted shrugged his shoulders. On the other hand, Kay had been quiet since she arrived. You look worried that your boyfriend will find out about your relationship with Ted, Kay. Well, he probably already knows since you're here. As I smirked, Kay looked downcast. Apparently, the man Kay truly loves also works in this company. So it was only a matter of time before Kay's infidelity was exposed. Ted resisted until the very end. But after being admonished by Mr. Wilson, he finally agreed to cooperate with the divorce discussions. Well, I'll be heading home now. As I stood up to leave, Ted voiced his dissatisfaction. Showing up at my workplace? You've got to be kidding. If this ruins my reputation, what are you going to do? You're the one at fault here, not me. Besides, an affair won't get you fired. In fact, you cannot be fired for having an affair. But if word spreads around the office, who knows what might happen? It could make his work more difficult and the office a more uncomfortable place. But that's not my problem. I just came to talk about the divorce. Whether Ted decides to quit his job or not has nothing to do with me. The same goes for Kay. Well, do your best. With that, I left Ted and Kay at the office. After that, I was able to get the division of property from Ted through my lawyer. However, according to Vice President Mr. Wilson, there were some problems. It happened after I left his office. Word of their affair spread like wildfire throughout the company. Naturally, Kay's boyfriend also heard about it. The two of them had a big fight, and the man broke up with her on the spot. Infuriated by her breakup, Kay demanded that Ted pay her compensation for damages. She claimed that Ted abused her mentally. Of course, Ted was not going to agree to that. Eventually, it all spiraled into a messy court battle. And because the affair had become public knowledge in the company, and they were now in court, both of them ended up leaving the company. had tried to find another job, but it was difficult because of his age. It seems like he's now working part-time at a local shop. Kay, on the other hand, is apparently pregnant and has been holed up at her parents' house. Anyway, I think they can't hold their heads high until the court ruling is made. My boss even suggested that I come back as a full-time employee. Thanks to that, I'm now working hard as a full-time employee. My relationship with Ken, who's studying hard and preparing for college, is also going great. He even told me, I have a girlfriend and I want you to meet her. Even though I'm not his mother anymore, is it okay if it's me? Right now, I'm busy supporting my son with his college preparation. My name is Catherine. I'm currently 34 years old, and I've been living with my mother at our family home since my father passed away 3 years ago. I chose to stay at home because I felt it was too risky to leave my mother alone. So I've been living at home for these 3 years. During this time, the worst kind of people paid a visit to me and my mother. These awful individuals were none other than my real brother, Bob, and his wife, Jane. I've known my brother since he was born, and Jane, his wife, was a classmate of his since middle school. They'd been dating since then, and Bob would bring Jane home every vacation, so I got to know her too. To put it bluntly, I can't forget these two. To be honest, they used to bully me just for fun. Both my parents were busy with their jobs, so it was pretty common for them to be absent on weekends. However, when they weren't home, that's when the worst time would start. Our family home, which we've been living in, is a rather spacious mansion built by my father, who was a CEO. But as soon as I was told to play hide and seek in this mansion and I got inside a closet, my brother and Jane immediately filled the closet with stuff, blocking my way out. I was often stuck in the closet until just before my parents returned home and would frequently get scolded by my mother for messing up the inside of the closet. However, since my mother only worked in the mornings, she came home early one day and saw Bob and Jane stuffing me in the closet and blocking the door. She was furious as if she was on fire. From then on, I was never locked in the closet again, but the harassment from the two never ceased. I hated my parents for not being at home when I needed them. Of course, I resented my brother and Jane, but I also felt spiteful towards my parents who wouldn't help me. However, when I reached middle school, for some unknown reason, Bob and Jane shredded my school uniform with scissors, scribbled all over almost all my textbooks with pens, and cut them with scissors. They even ruined my cushions and beddings. I later learned that the two, who were high school students at the time, got bad grades on their final exams and were upset from being scolded by their parents. That's probably why they took such a horrible revenge on me. I was shocked in my tattered room. Why am I experiencing such a thing? Though what when you and help me? I stood there, lost in those thoughts. Then, when I didn't come to the dining room, even at dinner time, my mother, who came to call me, saw my room and screamed. Upon hearing her, my father also rushed in. My brother, who came in last, was struggling to suppress his laughter, and occasional chuckles slipped out. But to my surprised parents, I said, "Mom, Dad, I want to leave this house." As soon as I said that, tears started to overflow. No one is helping me. Bob and Jane are always mean to me together. My toys, my study tools, and my clothes are all ruined. I don't want to live in such a house. I hate both of you, Dad and Mom. You guys won't help me. Perhaps it was the first time I cried so much in front of my family. Until then, I'd have been silently enduring and crying quietly even when things were tough. But then, I cried out loud like a child. Seeing me like this, my mother hugged me and said, "I'm sorry for everything until now." Even my brother, after seeing such a scene, seemed to realize the gravity of the situation and tried to run away. But my father grabbed him by the collar. "Do you realize what you've done? This is a crime." Although my father didn't yell, his low voice was scary even to me, who wasn't being scolded. "A crime? That's an exaggeration. We just played a bit too much. Destruction of property is a crime. Do you understand that you need to compensate for it, right? But Catherine is family. And I'm a minor. Minors can't be criminals, right?" My father sighed deeply at my brother's frivolous words. "Indeed, a minor like you doesn't have the ability to pay. However, it's the parents who clean up the mess. If you can't compensate, we will have to. We also bear responsibility for raising you this way. I think it's time for you to go live with your uncle." This uncle was actually my father's younger brother. He was a stern figure who absolutely despised dishonesty and was feared by all the neighborhood kids, kind of like a boogeyman. He was nice to well-behaved children like me and the other kids, but he had no tolerance for pranksters like my brother Bob and Jane. Bob never got along well with this uncle. No way. I don't want to live with my uncle. I promise I won't do this kind of thing anymore. I've heard that too many times. When you and Jane locked Catherine in the closet. When you two chased Catherine around. When you threw bugs at Catherine, knowing she's afraid of them. Each time we learned of your actions, we scolded you and you always promised to never do it again. But you did it anyway. We can't keep someone who hurts our family at home, even if they are family. To set foot in this house again. With that said, my father took Bob by the scruff of his neck and dragged him away. Later, I found out that my father and mother had been angry at Bob's behavior. However, even after being scolded, Bob didn't seem to understand why he was being punished. He must be beyond help. That's what I decided to think. There are idiots in the world who don't understand the most basic rules of society. I learned this from watching Bob and Jane. Originally, Bob planned to go to some university on our father's dime after finishing high school. However, our father told him, someone like you will just end up hurting others even in university. And so Bob ended up working at our uncle's company right after graduating from high school. However, it seemed like Bob desperately wanted to escape our uncle's place as soon as possible. As soon as he finished high school, he rented an apartment with Jane, who had also just finished high school, and they wanted to live together. They started their cohabitation life with the understanding that neither our parents nor our uncle would support them financially. Neither our parents nor uncle would help with rent or living expenses. And then for some reason, Bob asked me to lend him some money. At the time, I had just entered high school and was not working part-time. All the money I had saved up, which used to be stolen by Bob when he lived at home, was fully reimbursed by my father and mother as I had written it all down in a notebook. So I did have the money that I had diligently saved up, but I had no intention of handing it over to him. To Bob's request, I replied, "Aren't you ashamed to be asking your high school sister for money? I'm not even working, so I don't have any extra money. There's no way I'm giving you any." After that, I told both my mother and father about Bob's attempt to borrow money from me, and they were angry and promised that they would not provide any further assistance. I thought that Bob and Jane should live on their own without relying on others. Since then, I have worked hard and went to college. I studied diligently in college as well, and after graduation, I joined a company where I continued to learn new things. I was so busy with my own life that I had completely forgotten about Bob. But just as I had forgotten about him, an invitation to his wedding arrived at our house. Oh, so those two are finally getting married. I thought as my parents and I discussed whether we should attend the wedding of a family member. However, a few days before the wedding, my father collapsed and was taken away by an ambulance. He was always a fragile man, but this was the first time he had collapsed, so both my mother and I panicked and called an ambulance. Don't call me during this crucial period of my bachelorhood. Even when I told him that our father had been urgently hospitalized, he brushed it off, saying, "He just tripped, didn't he? Make sure to come to my wedding." Just with that, he hung up. Not long after, our father passed away. Given the circumstances, a wake and funeral were inevitable, so my mother and I informed my brother that we wouldn't be able to attend his wedding. Despite his insistence that we come, my mother and I decided to remain absent. We also informed Jane's parents about our father's passing and our inability to attend the wedding. Although Jane's parents understood our predicament, my brother and Jane said, "You guys not coming to the wedding is so disrespectful." I suppose the term rudeness was coined for people like you. We put in a lot of effort for our wedding. Are you trying to ruin it? The words that were left on my mother and my voicemail were so absurd that it made me want to ask who the real rude person was here. While my mother and I were busy conducting the funeral smoothly, my brother and Jane went ahead with their wedding without giving a second thought to our father's death. From then on, I have worked hard and gone to college. I have studied diligently in college as well, and after graduation, I joined a company where I continued to learn new things. I was so busy with my own life that I had completely forgotten about Bob. But just as I'd forgotten about him, an invitation to his wedding arrived at our house. The bride was, of course, Jane, with whom he was living. Oh, so those two are finally getting married? I thought as my parents and I discussed whether we should attend the wedding of a family member. However, a few days before the wedding, my father collapsed and was taken away by an ambulance. He was always a fragile man, but this was the first time he had collapsed, so both my mother and I panicked and called an ambulance. At that time, I reached out to my brother, but he replied, "I'm about to get married. Don't call me during this crucial period of my bachelorhood." Even when I told him that our father had been urgently hospitalized, he brushed it off, saying, "He just tripped, didn't he?" Make sure to come to my wedding. Just with that, he hung up. Not long after, our father passed away. Given the circumstances, a wake and funeral were inevitable. So my mother and I informed my brother that we wouldn't be able to attend his wedding. Despite his insistence that we come, my mother and I decided to remain absent. We also informed Jane's parents about our father's passing and our inability to attend the wedding. Although Jane's parents understood our predicament, my brother and Jane said, "You guys not coming to the wedding is so disrespectful." I suppose the term rudeness was coined for people like you. We put in a lot of effort for our wedding. Are you trying to ruin it? The words that were left on my mother and my voicemail were so absurd that it made me want to ask who the real rude person was here. While my mother and I were busy conducting the funeral smoothly, my brother and Jane went ahead with their wedding without giving a second thought to our father's death. So from then on, my mother and I never mentioned it, but we felt our relationship with my brother had been completely severed. But out of the blue, my brother showed up at our doorstep. When I opened the front door in response to his, "I've got a delivery" over the intercom, there stood my brother and Jane. I was caught off guard as the monitor only showed silhouettes. As soon as I opened the door, my brother and Jane, carrying large luggage, barged in, pushing me aside. Hey, what's the rush?" I protested. It seemed that my brother had completely forgotten the words of our father, who had once told him never to step into our house again. Just the two of them, who had brashly entered the house, put down the luggage they were carrying in the hallway, and started talking nonsense at me. "You and Mom should leave this house immediately." Wait, isn't Mom diagnosed with dementia? This luxurious mansion is not suited for someone like her and a loser like you who never improves. This kind of mansion should be taken over by glamorous people like Jane and me. So you guys should leave right away. What Tamstramlations? I was stunned. What on earth was my brother talking about? Furthermore, while presuming that our mother has dementia, he's planning to evict her. I was left speechless. Then, our mother emerged from a room in the back. "Catherine, what's going on?" Out was my mother, peeked out, and saw my brother. She said something unbelievable. I said, "Co, who may you be?" "If you're a stranger, please leave," she said. Hearing this, my brother and Jane laughed mockingly at her. "See, this is how she is every time we call her. Her dementia must be getting worse. I'll leave it to you to take care of Mom. You can have Mom. I'll take the mansion. After all, I'm the eldest son, so it's only right that I get the mansion." With that, my brother walked deeper into the house. Moreover, Jane, imitating Bob, turned to me and our mother and said, "Take the old lady and get out." "I never want to see you again." I rushed to my mother's side and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" After that, as if we were being driven out, my mother and I left the mansion. Just leaving all the old furniture behind, my mother and I took our belongings and fled the house. Fortunately, a friend of mine who heard about our situation offered us his house, saying he was abroad and couldn't take care of it. Originally, his cousin was taking care of the house, but since he's going to be transferred to another state next year, it seemed like perfect timing since there would be no one to look after it. The deductions took Seclete to look after the house. Upon arriving at the house and setting down our luggage, my mother and I finally felt at ease and took a deep breath. Then my mother said with a laugh, "We've left that house, and I still don't like the way Bob and Jane act. Maybe we should sell the house." She said it outright. I asked my mother the question that had been on my mind. "Bob said you have dementia, Mom? What's that about?" "Oh, that. About 2 years ago, I started getting frequent requests from those two to lend them money. But they didn't even come to their father's funeral, and they never contacted me afterwards. I just couldn't comprehend how they had the nerve to ask for money. So every time, I pretended not to know them and said, 'Hi, I don't know you. You're a stranger to me, right?' Oh, I see. It seems that Bob and Jane misunderstood my mother's indifference and disregard for them, treating them as strangers because she didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. They mistook this as her genuinely forgetting who they were. That's why they thought she had dementia. In any case, I think it's wrong to evict someone you think has dementia." My mother immediately decided to arrange for the sale of the mansion. We've been talking about selling the overly large mansion since our father passed away, and we were living there just the two of us. So the buyer is pretty much decided. All that's left is to go through the formalities. When I talked to a real estate acquaintance and explained the situation to the executive of the buyer, they agreed that if we left Bob and Jane alone, the house would be in serious trouble and something needed to be done quickly. And then a week later, my smartphone rang incessantly. My mother's phone was the same. There were many calls from Bob to my mother's phone and from Jane to mine. They both probably wanted to tell us the same thing, but we found it amusing and decided to ignore them for 30 minutes, and we just enjoyed our tea. As we chatted, an hour passed without us noticing, and it seemed like Bob and Jane had been trying to reach us the whole time. When I finally answered the call, Jane exclaimed, "Finally? Why didn't you answer immediately? There's a big problem. The house has been taken over." "Wait, didn't you two take over the house?" I responded, "No, Bob and I took over this mansion, but now strange people have come and are demanding that we leave. They just barged into the house and are trying to kick us out. Our mansion has been taken over," she exclaimed. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I really wanted to tell her that they were the ones who invaded the house in the first place and were unlawfully occupying it. Chuckling a bit, I replied, "You're talking about taking over, but you're not even the legal owner. My mother, who is the rightful owner, has sold the house to a new owner. So strangers who have no connection at all should quickly move out." "What? She sold it." "This mansion?" "But this mansion belongs to Bob," she responded in shock. "When did anyone ever say that?" He asked. "Well, no one said it, but Bob is the eldest son. Isn't this house, this property, and his dad's company eventually going to belong to him? And I'll be living elegantly as the wife of the CEO in this mansion." Despite all of that, Jane was frantic. I burst out laughing again. The fact that she thought that just because he was the eldest son, he would automatically receive the mansion and become the CEO of the company his father used to run was astonishing. Such naive thinking. Given Jane's staunch belief, Bob probably also believed that he would inherit both the mansion and the company, even though no one had ever promised him that. Again, I laughed at Jane's words. "Bob as a CEO? Aren't you as a CEO's wife? How can you even dream of such things? You're both still working as low-level employees at the company where you first got picked up without ever studying to succeed in the business." She probably didn't expect to be ridiculed. Stunned by my words, Jane retorted, "What? In that case, I'll inherit the company from Uncle." I laughed even more. "You should at least check your company's personnel announcement. As for my uncle's company, his cousin's son became the president last month." "What? So there's no way for Bob to become CEO, and I can't be a CEO's wife?" Jane was in disbelief. "That's correct. Can I hang up now? I don't think I need to talk to strangers anymore," I replied. "Wait, please. Catherine, give us some money," Jane pleaded. "Well, goodbye then." I ended the call. I later heard from Uncle about what happened next. Bob and Jane didn't want to leave the mansion. They clung to the pillars and refused to go. Uncle had to come and pick them up. It seems that since they were hired by Uncle's company, they have been undergoing strict education, and they were so scared that they cried as Uncle took them away. It was decided that they would be left at a mountain retreat of one of Uncle's acquaintances because they were too unpredictable when left on their own. They've been warned by Uncle that if they don't straighten up at the retreat, they will not be able to return to the company. Despite being trapped at the retreat, they won't be able to leave the mountain for the rest of their lives. Despite this, they have attempted to escape multiple times, but have been caught each time. As for me, the person who promised to take care of the house management was my fiancé, who is currently working abroad. I am currently living in his parents' house. He plans to end his long-term assignment abroad this year, so we will soon be planning our wedding ceremony. Of course, we will not be inviting Bob and Jane. You will be staying home during our family trip because it is not enjoyable when outsiders are around. If I remember, I may bring you a souvenir." Came the triumphant voice of my mother-in-law over the phone. I was supposed to go on this trip with my in-laws and my husband. Yet here I am, left behind. Ever since we got married, my mother-in-law, who dotes on her son, never lets a day go by without making a snide remark or nagging me. Stay at home. That's going to be a problem. Upon hearing my response, my mother-in-law laughed as if mocking me. Is that a problem? Are you? Just think of it as punishment for not listening to my advice. The phone line went dead abruptly. Truly a problem. Not for me, but for you guys, right? My name is Jessica. I am a 30-year-old working housewife. I manage household chores and work part-time at the local supermarket. It has been 3 years since I married my husband, Mike. Mike was a co-worker at the company I used to work for. Although we belonged to different departments, we were on the same floor and often chatted even before we started dating. What brought us closer was a year-end party at the office. At this cross-departmental gathering, I happened to sit next to Mike. We were already close, so our conversation flowed as usual. Mike excused himself to go to the bathroom at one point, and I was left listening to the lively chatter of the group next to us. That's when a drunken boss from another department started to bother me, persistently urging me to drink more. Not sure how to respond, as he was a boss I rarely dealt with. Mike returned from the bathroom just in time. He glanced at me and the boss, then calmly placed his hands on the boss's shoulders and led him away to another table. After a while, Mike returned to our table alone and asked me, "That guy really can't handle his alcohol, can he? Are you okay?" That was when I began to see Mike in a different light, and I confessed my feelings first, which led to our relationship. Our relationship progressed smoothly from there, and we got married 3 years ago. While we don't have children yet, our relationship as a married couple is solid. Despite the challenges of being trapped at the retreat, we have found fulfillment in our marriage. Fulfillment of our married life. There is one issue that troubles me. That is my mother-in-law with whom we are living. Currently, Mike and I are living in his parents' house. When we first got married, we lived in an apartment, but there was a fire in the neighboring unit, and our apartment was also flooded due to the water used in the firefighting effort. We had no choice but to evacuate, as the apartment was uninhabitable. We were at a loss about where to go while the apartment was being repaired when Mike's mother offered, "Why don't you two stay at our place?" We took up her offer and decided to live with Mike's parents. We are grateful for their offer at the time. The problem started after we moved in. Although she occasionally made snide comments even before, I had accepted them because of her deep love for Mike. However, after we started living together, the intensity of her nagging increased. For instance, one weekend, as I was enjoying a cup of coffee in the living room after finishing all the housework, my mother-in-law, who had been out, came home and immediately started bustling about the house. Then she came up to me and said, "Jessica, your cleaning is too sloppy. You need to spend more time on it and put some gratitude into it for your hardworking husband. As his wife, it's your duty to support him. I can't believe you can't even do this much. You're failing as a wife. If you're unhappy, then leave right now." To be honest, I thought, here we go again. I've been told the same thing almost every day. After all, the only reason she let us live together is because she wanted to live with her son Mike again, and my presence as a wife is probably nothing more than an annoyance to her. "Mom, please don't be so hard on Jessica," I said. "Well, there is some truth to what you're saying. Even if she's working part-time, slacking off on housework isn't good. More often than not, Mike tends to side with his mother. While it's not wrong to value his biological mother, I sometimes wish he would stick up for me, his wife. In fact, it's not my intention to neglect house chores. Despite working 4 days a week, even if it's for a short time, I've never once neglected my duties of managing the household chores for a family of 4. This remains true even when I'm not feeling well. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, although a housewife, is out and about having fun almost every day. Since we started living together, I've never seen her do any household chores. However, given that we're living under her roof, I can't openly complain. But in this awkward environment, I just kept my patience. Then one day, something unusual happened. Mike suggested that we should go on a trip, just the two of us. "Why don't we go to a spa resort next month?" he said. "The busy season has ended, and I have to take time off work anyway. I had to take some annual leave. If I'm meaning to take a break, I thought it would be nice to relax somewhere. A spa, huh? Sounds great. I haven't requested any work shifts for next month yet, so I can take any time off." After discussing various things, we decided to go on a 2-day spa trip in the middle of the next month. As we plan to go on a weekday, we'll probably be able to spend our time quietly and without any rush. I was so excited and couldn't hold back. I kept gathering information about our destination whenever I had time. "Jessica, I heard you're going on a trip with Mike. Why didn't you tell me?" To be honest, I was afraid she would say something like I'm going to if she found out. But I couldn't say that, so as I was fumbling for words, my mother-in-law sighed in exasperation. Then she said exactly what I was afraid she would. "Next month is the anniversary of my husband and me. I'd love to celebrate with a family trip. I think a luxurious hotel would be nice." Like a child, my mother-in-law started to throw a tantrum about wanting to go. Of course, I don't want to go on a trip with my mother-in-law at all. But this time, Mike and I were thinking of going by ourselves. How about we go together next time? I tried to be as accommodating as possible in my response. But my mother-in-law wouldn't back down. "It's not the same if it's not this time. It's our anniversary celebration. If that's the case, she should just go with her husband." Just as I was about to say that, Mike came home from work. "Mike, welcome home." I was just talking to Jessica about the trip. Oh, I can't wait. And Mike seemed to agree with her. I wondered who let the cat out of the bag about the trip, but with the way things were going, it was probably Mike who told my mother-in-law. Noticing my gaze, Mike looked a little uncomfortable. Mom's really looking forward to it, so let's postpone our trip for another time. It'll be even more fun if we all go together. Then my father-in-law joined in, saying, a vacation, huh? Sounds like fun. With that, it became impossible for me to refuse going on this trip with the four of us. Alright, next time it's just gonna be the two of us, promise. Although reluctant, I agreed, and Mike gave me a look of relief. I wasn't quite satisfied, but there was nothing I could do about it at this point. At the very least, I decided to be the one to make the best of the situation. I decided to take on the task of choosing the sightseeing spots we wanted to visit and the local dishes we wanted to eat. My mother-in-law dislikes making such preparations, so my suggestions went through without a hitch. On the day of the trip, I had already packed everything, including clothes, in my suitcase the day before. The plan was to wake up an hour before departure, have a leisurely breakfast, and then leave the house. However, when I woke up to the sound of my alarm clock, I realized that Mike, who should have been sleeping next to me, was not there. I thought he might have already gotten up and started preparing, so I headed for the living room. But Mike was nowhere to be found. Not in the living room, bathroom, kitchen, or even by the front door. My mother-in-law and father-in-law were also missing. With a sinking feeling, I dialed Mike's cell phone, but the call didn't connect. When I called my mother-in-law's phone, she answered immediately. "Oh, Jessica, dear. What's up?" she asked. "Mike can't pick up the phone right now because he's driving." "Driving? Where on earth are the three of you right now?" they asked. My mother-in-law replied nonchalantly, "Isn't it obvious? We're on a family vacation. We can't enjoy a family vacation with an outsider around, so you'll have to stay at home. If we remember, we might even get you a souvenir." I could hear her triumphant voice over the phone. "Stay at home. That's going to be a problem," I said. My mother-in-law laughed scornfully and replied, "Is that a problem? For you. Just think of it as punishment for not listening to my advice." With that, she abruptly hung up the phone. I covered my face with both hands and shook my shoulders. But instead of sobbing, I let out a hearty laugh. They'd better enjoy their journey. I'm sure they'll regret leaving me behind, I thought to myself. I quickly opened a hotel booking site and reserved a fancy hotel in the tourist spot we were supposed to visit that day. After quickly getting dressed and putting on makeup, I ate breakfast and grabbed my luggage. All right, time to have fun, I thought as I jumped on the train. I'd gone through the trouble of researching various tourist spots, and I was determined to go on a vacation. With that single-minded desire, I set off on a solo trip. It was a small tourist spot, so I might run into Mike and my in-laws, but I wasn't bothered. After all, they were the ones at fault. As I was thinking about this, the train finally reached its destination. I finally reached my destination. From this point on, I will forget about my mother-in-law, and Mike can enjoy myself to the fullest. With that in mind, I walked into a quaint boutique I spotted, had tea in a trendy cafe, and mingled with the locals, thoroughly enjoying my trip. And as the day turned into night, it was finally time to check in. The hotel I booked was among the top luxury hotels in this area. I thought I needed to do something as drastic as this to refresh myself. As I passed through the automatic hotel doors, heading towards the check-in counter, I heard a woman's loud voice. "Why can't we stay here? We're willing to pay." Looking closer, it was my mother-in-law causing the commotion. Of course, they wouldn't be able to stay, as this wasn't the hotel I booked for the four of us. Observing from a safe distance, I noticed Mike spotted me as he exclaimed, "Hey, Jessica, what's going on? We couldn't stay at the hotel you had booked, so we had to find another hotel, and they're full." As he approached me aggressively, my mother-in-law did the same. Her face was turning beet red with anger. Well, that's expected. After all, they won't hand over the keys unless the person who made the reservation is present. It's a security measure. I did warn you, didn't I? At this point, they finally seemed to realize their foolishness, exchanging glances in utter disbelief. Just as they were about to create more ruckus, several hotel staff members rushed over. The sight of my mother-in-law being gently but firmly escorted out of the hotel was quite comical. Remember this, we will stay in a place far more luxurious than this hotel. Feeling somewhat relieved, I decided to check into the hotel, leaving my accommodation-less mother-in-law and Mike behind. After completing the check-in process, I was escorted to my room. With its clean decor and luxurious interior, I felt as though I was in a dream. And once I put down my luggage, I decided to explore the hotel. After strolling around the hotel for a while, I returned to the check-in lobby. Guests kept coming in. I sat on the sofa in the lobby and was spaced out for a while when a pair of young women sat next to me. The two were excited, exchanging their impressions of the hotel. And they started to talk about something interesting. Kate, do you know? It's about the hotel near the station. There's a very bad rumor about it. Apparently, you can hear hallucinations in the second-floor room, and all your belongings get stolen. Not only that, but it seems there was even a case where someone died. And no one knows who's responsible to this day. We're lucky to be staying here, aren't we? Is that true? But why hasn't anyone been arrested? You would call the police. Police in such a case, wouldn't you? Well, there are rumors that the hotel staff are in on it too. Ah, so scary. What a dangerous story. When I casually looked at the time, it was almost time for my dinner reservation. I stood up in a hurry and rushed to the restaurant. I'm so satisfied. After enjoying dinner, I returned to the hotel. I took a bath, changed into my pajamas, and was watching TV when my smartphone alerted me to an incoming call. Hello, we found a hotel we can stay in. It's super comfortable. Too bad you can't stay here with us. Well, we'll enjoy it twice as much for you, so no worries. It was from my cheerful mother-in-law. Huh, is that Sue? You're lucky to have found a place to stay on such short notice. When I responded nonchalantly, my mother-in-law continued, Isn't it quiet and easy to spend time here because there are hardly any other guests? It's close to the tourist spot and it's a beautiful hotel. I wonder why that is. That's when I realized, could it be the hotel near the station? That's right. What about it? I remembered the story about the bad reputation hotel I heard in the hotel lobby before I went to dinner. I think you should run. I didn't necessarily believe the rumor was true, but where there's smoke, there's fire. But my mother-in-law laughed off what I say. Are you jealous of us staying at a good place? Well then, be regretful. Bye. Again, my mother-in-law hung up the phone one-sidedly. I didn't feel like calling her back. I gave my advice and fulfilled my duty. I turned off my smartphone. I didn't want my relaxation time to be disturbed anymore. After that, I spent a leisurely time and fell into a comfortable sleep. And the next day, after checking out of the hotel, I visited the tourist spots I couldn't go to the day before and arrived home when the sun was setting. There was light leaking out of the windows of the house. It seemed that the three of them had already returned home. I'm home. I purposely announced my return in my usual tone. When I opened the door to the living room, all three of them started making a fuss at once. I, who was taken aback, managed to calm them down. Then my mother-in-law started to talk about the incident that happened last night. After the three had gone to sleep, there seemed to be rustling sounds. Then my mother-in-law reported hearing the noise of someone entering the room. Paralyzed by fear, she quietly stayed in bed, and the intruder seemed to wander around the room for about 10 minutes before silently leaving. Feeling relieved, my mother-in-law drifted back to sleep, only to wake up the next morning to find that all of their belongings, including the wallets and smartphones that were supposed to be on the desk, had vanished. All that was left was the coin pouch and key holder that Mike had put in his jacket's inside pocket. In a panic, they informed the hotel staff, only to be told, please pay for the room at least, and the staff didn't even call the police. The troubled trio used the coins Mike had to make a call from a public phone to a relative living nearby asking for help. Fortunately, the relative arrived quickly, covering the hotel charges and somehow getting them back home. They said they would go to the police to report the incident soon, and that's when their anger turned towards me. If only you had told us more seriously to run, we wouldn't have ended up in this situation, they said. That's right, you bear some responsibility for this incident, Jessica. What are you going to do about it? But if my in-laws hadn't left me behind to go on a trip, this wouldn't have happened in the first place. When I expressed this candidly, Mike raised his voice. Shut up. You're just the wife. Don't get cheeky. We're getting a divorce. I can't put up with you anymore. I was too flabbergasted to say anything. I silently went to our bedroom, pulled out something from the cabinet, and returned to the living room to show it to Mike. Divorce? Fine by me. I don't need a husband who won't protect his bullied wife, I said. Mike's face turned pale. What I had brought out were the divorce papers I had asked a lawyer to prepare. I had been preparing for this day to come. Perhaps not expecting that I would agree, Mike was flustered. No, maybe we should think about it a little more. But then my mother-in-law seized the opportunity to start pushing Mike towards the divorce. You should just get rid of such a horrible wife now. Your mom will find you someone new. And able to go against his mother, Mike eventually agreed to the divorce. Well then, goodbye. Please enjoy your life with your beloved family. I ignored Mike, who was breaking down on the spot, and walked out of the house. Later, through my lawyer, I submitted the divorce papers, and the divorce was successfully finalized. Several times after that, Mike pathetically begged me to get back together, but of course I ignored all of them. I'm going to protect Jessica from now on, he said, but it was too late. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who'd managed to get rid of me, seemed to be in high spirits for a while, but that didn't last long. The news of the divorce and the end of their cohabitation spread in the neighborhood, and the rumor-loving people traced it back to her harassment of me, exposing her nasty character. She started getting pointed at by people around her, and it seemed that finding a new wife for Mike was no longer a priority. I returned to my hometown and managed to find a new job thanks to a friend's introduction. I've had enough of marriage for now. I think I'm going to enjoy being single for a while. A cute cat, beautiful flowers, and a beautiful princess. Mandy and I filled the blank notebook with all kinds of drawings. I'm such a clumsy, ugly, and slow girl. It's no surprise if my parents abandoned me, she mumbled emotionlessly, hoping that she would learn to love herself someday. I kept on drawing, filling the page while sitting next to her. There was a wonderful story waiting for a child unloved by her real parents. My name is Nicole. I'm 36 years old, working in administration at a small company. I married my husband, Scott, who is 2 years older than me, 5 years ago. Although Scott is a man of few words, he is kind and a husband I am proud of, trusted by those around us. Even as a loving couple, we had our worries. They are my sister and her husband. When we went back home for the summer holidays, my sister's family had already arrived. As expected, she started boasting about her son immediately. It's getting busy again. It's so tough. Well, it can't be helped. Jake is like a prince out of a storybook. Handsome, smart, and excellent in sports. My father at home replied to my sister's remarks. Jake seemed very proud too. Jake, who had just turned 5, has a face and tall figure that anyone would say is good looking. Considering that he's smart and good at sports, I can understand why they want to brag about him. It does get a bit tiresome hearing them boast about their son every time we meet, but I guess that's just how it is. My sister patted Jake's head and quickly glanced at the corner of the room. There was her other child sitting on the carpet, drawing. Mandy, who's 7 years old. Even though Jake is so excellent, it's really troublesome that she is so slow. That's true. My sister's husband also laughed, agreeing with my sister's inappropriate comment. Feeling sorry for Mandy, who continued drawing without changing her expression amidst such treatment from her parents, I couldn't help but intervene. Why don't you guys teach her? Or maybe enroll her in a gymnastics class? No way! It's a waste of time and money on such a slow child. My usually silent husband, who had been quietly sipping his tea, perhaps feeling sorry for Mandy, moved closer to her to peek at her drawing. Mandy, is that a princess you're drawing? You're really good at this. You can tell you've never raised a child. Any 7-year-old can draw that. My sister replied, "The lady, 6 neats," I exclaimed, glaring at her. She snorted in response. What's the point of drawing pictures? They won't earn you money in the future. It's a world of difference compared to Jake, who's already making money as a model. Saying that, my sister started lovingly stroking Jake's head again. My heart ached when I thought about how Mandy must feel watching this emotionlessly. Every time we meet my sister and her husband, we are subjected to this sight. My sister and her husband dote on Jake, who is capable and cute, and boast about him everywhere. On the other hand, Mandy is subjected to their harsh words because they see her as incapable. The difference in the time, effort, and money they spend on them is as clear as day and night. From my perspective, Mandy is also cute, and whenever we visit, she kindly helps Grandma. She's a gentle and wonderful child. However, it seems like my sister and her husband are completely blind to Mandy's charms. My husband and I only step in when things go too far, but my sister and her husband jestingly say, "Well, we could give our daughter to you. You're struggling to have your own kids, aren't you?" In such a targeted way, my sister knows how to throw words that hurt me the most. Yes, my husband and I don't have any children. We've wanted children and have been undergoing infertility treatments since we got married. However, no matter how advanced the treatments we tried, I never became pregnant. Eventually, we reached our physical, emotional, and financial limits and stopped treatment before our relationship became strained. That's probably why I'm so concerned about Mandy, who's neglected by my sister and my brother-in-law. If my sister doesn't want her, I've thought many times about actually taking her in. My husband, too, finds Mandy's situation pitiful and has offered to adopt her if that's what I want. However, it's also important whether Mandy herself wants to be raised by us. My mother has also worried about Mandy and thought about adopting her a few times. But since her only income is her pension, it would be hard for her to support Mandy through high school, and she was conflicted about whether it was right to take a child away from her parents. One day, while I was wrestling with these thoughts, my sister and her husband crossed a line. One chilly autumn evening, when I came home from work, Mandy was standing at the door of our apartment. "Mandy, what's going on?" "Where's your mom?" They asked. "I'm sorry," Mandy replied, hugging her backpack tightly and looking down. I couldn't quite comprehend the situation. I could comprehend the situation, but I was worried she would catch a cold. So I invited her in while holding her trembling shoulders. So once I had given her some warm hot chocolate, Mandy began to open up little by little. Apparently, her brother Jake had a modeling job in New York over the weekend, and my sister and her husband had gone with him. But they said it would be a waste of money for travel expenses and homework to take Mandy, so they left her at my place without telling me. That's awful. Unable to contain my anger, I cursed at my sister's utter lack of maternal instincts. "It's because I'm ugly and useless?" Mandy looked down as she said this. "That's not true, Mandy. You're a sweet and lovely girl." Even as I tried to comfort her, Mandy just shook her head. Seeing my small niece so dejected and denying her own worth made me want to cry. When my husband came home, he was, of course, furious with my sister and her husband. Despite our attempts to reach my sister by phone and email, she responded unilaterally, "I'll pick her up on Sunday," and then hung up. I couldn't understand how someone could treat their own child, who they brought into the world, so shabbily. Despite waiting for me to come home from work since the afternoon, standing in front of our apartment all by herself. Despite how cold and scared she must have been in her small body. Despite waiting patiently without crying. "Mandy, let's play with Uncle." "We'll play a lot." My husband, his hands shaking with rage, forced a smile and spoke to Mandy. I decided I was going to do anything and everything that would make Mandy happy. That being said, Mandy, who had lived a life oppressed by my sister and her husband, seemed hesitant to accept our offers. She carefully spread the notebook she brought in her little backpack on the desk and spent hours drawing. So we decided to draw pictures with Mandy, spreading our notebooks next to hers. Then Mandy started glancing at my drawings. "What's that?" "Huh? It's a cat." "What?" Mandy's eyes widened. My husband burst out laughing when he saw my drawing. A cat? That's not a monster. Where's a monster? It's a cat. A genuine cat." Protesting to my too rude husband, Mandy gave a small chuckle. Involuntarily, my husband and I exchanged glances. "See, even Mandy is laughing at you." "Mandy, draw us a real cat." Blinked. "Mandy, this is a cat, right? It looks like a cat, doesn't it?" Mandy couldn't stop laughing. Maybe she found our interaction with our cat hilarious. So Mandy's smile, which we saw for the first time, was so cute that both my husband and I were hooked and started laughing as well. After that, we drew a lot of pictures together. Mandy seemed to find my drawings hilarious and laughed at whatever I drew. I was drawing quite seriously, though. Through the drawings, Mandy gradually opened up to us and told us about her favorite foods and her dream of becoming a comic book artist. "That's a wonderful dream," I told her, and Mandy shyly smiled. Then late on Sunday night, my sister appeared, grinning from ear to ear. Seeing my sister, Mandy's face turned expressionless again. "Wow, even though Jake is only 5 years old, he's doing great as a model, and even the photographers have been praising him. He might make his debut in showbiz soon. Come on, Mandy, it's time to go." Without even looking at Mandy, my sister harshly pulled her by her thin arm. Is this how she treats the daughter she left behind? Unbelievable. Truly unbelievable. Angered, I grabbed my sister's arm and took Mandy back. "Finn, what?" Chker apologize? At my words, my sister shook her head as if she was flabbergasted. "Oh, are you sympathizing with Mandy again? It can't be helped. You know it's tough when you have 2 kids. Well, you wouldn't understand, seeing as you don't have any. Even without kids, I can see that you're the worst parent in history." Perhaps she was very angry at being talked back to. My sister's face turned red, her eyes wide open, and she began ranting and raving, spitting all over. "You're such a failure. You can't even have kids." "That's right. I'll give Mandy to you." She's too much trouble for us. Maybe two failures can get along well, eh? Her vulgar laughter echoed throughout the house. Seeing that, my anger that had been building up for the past 3 days exploded. I had thought that I shouldn't separate a parent and child. I thought that might be a bond of love that I, who don't have children, can't understand. But I was wrong. I should have separated them sooner. This woman is not a mother, not even a human being. Even if Mandy forgives her, I will not. I looked up at my husband, who was standing next to me. As if he felt the same way as me, he gave me a big nod. So I smiled at my sister. Thank you. You're giving us Mandy, right? We will gratefully accept her. Huh. My sister was dumbfounded, her mouth agape. Of course, Mandy also looked up at us with her eyes wide open. We'll come to pick up Mandy's belongings tomorrow. Please let your husband and Jake know as well. Wait. I threw my stunned sister out of the entrance and locked the door with a click. I sat down to match the confused Mandy's gaze and spoke to her gently. Mandy, would you like to live with your aunt and uncle? What? You see, dear, your aunt loves you very much and wants to spend every day drawing pictures with you. Mandy hugged her backpack, which contained a cherished notebook, tightly. Can I draw every day? She won't get angry? No, we won't get angry. Let's draw a lot together. I gently stroked Mandy's small head. Mandy looked down and thought for a while before giving a small nod. After that, my husband and I actually took Mandy in. It seemed like my brother and his wife didn't think we would genuinely want to take Mandy. They probed us with suspicious eyes, as if they thought we had some ulterior motive. But when they realized we were serious, they were relieved and quickly let go of Mandy. They seemed to only care about their son, Jake. It's extremely distasteful, but right now, prioritizing Mandy's protection is more important than starting a fight, so we kept quiet. And so my husband and I consulted with the appropriate agencies and made it possible to act as her guardians. In the beginning, Mandy, who's anxiously tucked away in the corner of the room, would timidly approach us when we invited her to draw together. She then laughed at the earnest drawings my husband and I made together. And so, little by little, we became close and formed a family. Fast forward 20 years. Mandy, now 27, has fulfilled her dream of becoming a comic book artist, even having her work turned into animations and becoming a bit of a celebrity. Mandy moved out of our home to rent an apartment as a workspace in residence. But when she's not too busy with work, she often drops by for dinner. That's because Auntie's food is delicious. Every time I see Mandy happily munching on my food and saying those words, my face beams with joy. Knowing Mandy's expressionless and emotionless days from 20 years ago, seeing her happy now is especially gratifying. However, my sister, having heard somewhere about Mandy's success, decided to show up at our house on a day when Mandy happened to be visiting. Mandy, I heard you become a comic artist and are making good money. That's my girl, Anna. Looking at her mother, whose eyes were sparkling and who was acting overly flirty, Mandy's face turned stoic. I knew you had the talent. After all, you were so good at drawing when you were little. What nerve do you have to say that? My words spat out in disgust. These were ignored by my sister. So Mandy, I have a request. Our town is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, right? I'm part of the town hall staff involved in planning the anniversary event. I'd love for you to give a lecture. As a comic book artist, you're a role model for the kids, so they'd be thrilled. How about it? Consider it as a way to honor your parents. Will you do it? This woman has some nerve. After ignoring Mandy all these years, next to me, holding back my anger with a red face, Mandy murmured, "What about Jake?" Come, why not ask your beloved Jake, Mom? I think that would be a better idea. Oh. At Mandy's question, her older sister clearly grimaced. In truth, both Mandy and I knew. The darling Jake, the pride and joy of my sister, had disappeared right after graduating from college. Even as my sister and her husband searched for him frantically, they couldn't find any clue of his whereabouts. In other words, they were abandoned by their precious Jake. I couldn't care less about that ungrateful boy. I have you, my dear daughter. Nothing but a voice of disbelief could escape, past the point of anger. That to such a mother, Mandy gave an unexpected reply. I'll do it. Mandy, the way to go, Mandy. The best thing to have is indeed a daughter. My sister seemed to be in such high spirits that I wondered if she might start dancing. Is Mandy really planning to take it on? As if to reassure me, who's watching her anxiously, Mandy gave a small nod. On the day of the lecture, Mandy wanted us to be there, so my husband and I quietly took seats in the back of the auditorium. Of course, my sister and her husband were at the very front of the hall, proudly boasting about their daughter to those around them. Just in front of the full house, Mandy confidently began her speech. I couldn't help but tear up at the sight of Mandy's lively demeanor. And towards the end of the supporting meeting, I would have liked to introduce some people to you all. It was my family who raised me with love. With that announcement, Mandy descended into the audience. Mandy. My sister and her husband stood up, as if moved, ready to greet Mandy. However, Mandy completely ignored them and walked past. She came all the way to where we were seated in the back. This is Uncle Scott and Aunt Nicole, who took me in after my mother abandoned me to Mandy. Mandy looked at us and gave us a warm smile. That's a good one, she said. Just like a cartoonist. What a funny joke. Yes, that's right, I replied, smiling back at her. Look, Mandy, your beloved mom and dad are over here. Just with their faces distorted, my sister and her husband were desperately calling out to Mandy, but Mandy ignored them splendidly. My parents provided me with food and a place to live, but that was all. When I came in last in a race, they would call me a slowpoke, and when I caught a cold, they treated me like something dirty, saying don't pass it on to us. The hall fell silent at Mandy's revelation, and the voices of my sister and her husband saying Q and no echoed in panic. Ever since I was in kindergarten, they always criticized my drawings as dirty, crappy, and useless, and sometimes they even tore them up in front of me. Mandy's calm confession continued. Each time, my sister and her husband denied it, but as the people in the hall looked at them with disdain, their faces became paler and paler. Leaving such parents alone, Mandy faced us. The people who took me in, a child not loved by her parents, were Uncle Scott and Aunt Nicole. The gaze of the audience turned to us. Uncle Scott and Aunt Nicole praised my drawings a lot. They bought me many notebooks and pencils and drew a lot with me. On my birthdays, they prepared my favorite meals and cakes, and when I had fights with my friends, they worried with me about how to make up. Even without receiving any child support from my parents, they supported me to go to a specialized school so I could turn my love of drawing into a career. Therefore, I'm here today, thanks to Uncle Scott and Aunt Nicole. We haven't done anything special. We just cared for Mandy as if she were our own daughter. Yeah, for you folks, cherishing a child is a given. But there are parents who even abandon their own flesh and blood. Fiction and love my aunt and uncle who cared for me so deeply from the bottom of my heart. At Mandy's words, my vision blurs with tears. My heart swells with warmth. There were times when I worried about whether we could make Mandy happy after adopting her. Whether it was right to separate her from her real parents. But Mandy standing in front of us is proof. We were able to become a real family. Thank you for raising me. Thank you for supporting my dreams. Because you two loved me so much, I've learned to love myself. I'm so happy to be part of your family, Mandy. Unable to hold back, I pull Mandy into a hug and her slender hand gently strokes my back. My husband looks up, trying to hold back his tears. The entire venue is enveloped in tears and applause, echoing our sentiment. In the midst of this, my sister and her husband sneak out of venue. Naturally, their reputation takes a huge hit afterwards. The news spreads quickly throughout our small town, and apparently my sister quits her job out of fear of being seen. Seen and has been cooped up home all day. My sister's husband, who used to be an active member of the PTA and bragged about his parenting skills on his blog, was humiliated. His son, who he had bragged about so much, was nowhere to be found. His daughter, who had established herself as a comic artist, exposed his misdeeds, which were then spread by her fans' blog. The blog was heavily criticized, and he was scorned both at work and in the community. Because my sister quit her job first, her husband couldn't quit his job either. Under the stress, my sister doesn't do anything, just stays at home all day, and they seem to be having loud arguments late into the night, to the point where neighbors have had to call the police multiple times. Well, when their daughter disappeared, the neighbors had already noticed that something was wrong with that family. Meanwhile, their son Jake, who's gone missing, is actually traveling the world as a backpacker. Jake, who's the recipient of all his parents' love and expectations, was subjected to their interference in every aspect of his life, including his career choices and friendships, and had a stifling childhood. Naturally, whenever he had a girlfriend, they would immediately interfere, so he was fed up. Then he met an older female backpacker, and he left the country with just a backpack to follow her. The reason I know this is because Jake would occasionally visit our house since high school to interact with his sister Mandy. He had been worried about Mandy, who had been kicked out because of him, and he said that both Mandy and Jake were victims of their parents. although his parents think he's missing. In reality, whenever Jake returns home, he visits our house and leaves gifts and stories from his travels. Every time I see the two of them happily chatting, I vow to never tell their parents. At the beginning of the month, I bought a magazine featuring Mandy's comic. Sometimes in Mandy's comics, the protagonist's clothing has patterns that are illustrations of our cat, which Mandy and my husband call a monster. I tell her to stop because it's embarrassing, but Mandy just laughs and says, "It's a drawing by the artist I respect most in the world." Well, I can't help but laugh and say, if the cutest daughter in the world says so, I guess it can't be helped. "Oh, your father is standing up." But come quickly. In my surprise, my voice broke into a strange squawk. "No way! What that?" echoed my husband in equal shock. Seeing our astonishment, my father-in-law gently said, "Well then, shall we get going? To our spa retreat." My name is Rachel. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. My husband, Bob, is an ordinary office worker of the same age, a baby boy not even a year old. His wife is a very nice person, and our family relationships are good. However, the discord with my husband's family has always been a problem. This goes back to when we decided to get married. At the age of 27, we were colleagues in love. I had heard that he came from an ordinary family, but when it came time to get married, it turned out that his family was actually wealthy and all his family members had impressive backgrounds. His parents had been successful in running a trading company, and his younger brother, Kevin, who is 2 years younger than Bob, had graduated from a prestigious university and was actively running an IT company. By the way, Kevin had already been married, and his wife was a successful career woman. During the meet and greet with his family, my mother-in-law landed the first punch, saying, "You're the one." As expected, you seem to have outstanding qualities. You must be happy to become the bride of a wealthy family like ours. Furthermore, the mother-in-law and Kevin's wife got along very well. I felt a bit uneasy, but I believed Bob when he said, "Don't worry. I've always been disliked by my mother and have had little contact with the family. And we got married as planned. Ever since we got married, my mother-in-law has been making snide remarks at me. When I gave birth to our first son through a difficult C-section, she said, a C-section is such an easy way to give birth. Kevin's wife gave birth naturally, and it was a breeze. High-achieving career women just operate on a different level. When our son entered elementary school, she said, Kevin's kid goes to a famous private school. Bob remained calm, but one day he told me this story. I've always been compared. No matter what I did, I was always just average, while Kevin was smart, good at sports, and could do anything. So my mother always showed interest in him. Whenever she had the chance, she prioritized Kevin. The only refugee was our father. Dad treated Kevin and me equally, but it seemed like my mother didn't like that. And over time, I think their relationship started to deteriorate. Indeed, as Bob said, my father-in-law is a very gentle and calm person. Whenever my mother-in-law said something awful to me, he would casually send me supportive texts and even apologize on occasion. When our son started elementary school, it was our father-in-law who gifted him a wonderful backpack. And when Bob made a mistake at work and was ordered to relocate for a while, it was his father who provided us with emotional and financial support. My father-in-law retired from managing the trading company at the age of 75. My mother-in-law retired at the same time, and that brings us to the present. I've grown to feel an indescribable sense of gratitude towards my father-in-law. However, my father-in-law fell and hit his tailbone. It seems he slipped on the stairs at home. When we rushed to Bob's parents' house out of concern, we found the mother-in-law and Kevin's family there. You need to rest for a while. So, I've been thinking about moving in together? My husband asked us, to which the mother-in-law replied, of course not. Who would want to live with plain folks like you who are content with mediocrity? I meant Kevin and his wife. They're top-notch in everything, so I don't have to worry about my old age. And that's how the cohabitation with their parents and Kevin's family began. Our house and my husband's parents' home are just about a 10-minute drive away. As expected of a wealthy family's home, it's a magnificent house with even a small pond in the garden, looking like a mini park. My father-in-law, who loves gardening, had planted many colorful flowers in the yard. Not long after they started living together, I visited my husband's parents' house to check on the situation. When I went into my father-in-law's room, believe it or not, he was laid to rest in a dimly lit corner of the walk-in closet. But that's not all. The study that my father-in-law had been using before his injury was now being used nonchalantly by my husband's younger brother. I was so shocked by the situation that I complained to my mother-in-law. Isn't the way you're treating him terrible? My mother-in-law, with an indifferent look on her face, retorted, "Oh, since he won't be using it, Kevin is just making good use of it for his work from home." She said that nonchalantly, but still, it's pitiful for him to be in such a dark place. When I got angry, my mother-in-law got even angrier. "We're just using unused space. Don't you understand the concept of making good use of space?" I couldn't respond to her anymore and went back to my father-in-law. "I'm sorry for causing you worry," my father-in-law said apologetically. "No, it's nothing. Is there anything I can do to help?" Then my father-in-law, looking lonely, said, "If it's not too much trouble, could you water the flowers in the garden for me?" Looking at the garden, I saw the once beautiful flowers wilting. Fortunately, I also loved gardening and readily agreed. From then on, I used the excuse of gardening to visit my husband's parents' house daily, and also take care of my father-in-law. Although my mother-in-law and brother-in-law seemed annoyed, I couldn't be bothered with that when thinking about my father-in-law. After some time, my father-in-law had his birthday. My mother-in-law informed us that they would have a family party for my father-in-law's 80th birthday. My husband and I were invited, and we happily attended. My husband and I were also invited, and we were supposed to have a fun birthday party. On the day of the party, when we arrived at the house, the party had already started. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law were chatting, but my father-in-law was nowhere to be found. "Where is he?" they asked. My mother-in-law answered with a smile. "He's in his usual spot. It's too much trouble to move his bed, right?" He told us to go ahead and have fun without him. I was dumbfounded. And then I got angry. "But that doesn't mean you should leave your husband alone. This is supposed to be a celebration for him." My mother-in-law, looking irritated, said, "Well then, why don't just the two of you go to him?" "I don't like being in such a dark place." "Understood," I replied. My husband mumbled, "Mom, that's not right." And we both went to my father-in-law. "Oh, you've come." My father-in-law greeted us with immense joy at our visit. "Happy birthday. We hope your injury heals quickly and you regain your strength soon." We celebrated his birthday in the dimly lit room. He was delighted by the yellow umbrella we gifted him, hoping he would use it when he got better. He stared at it happily for a long time. Even after his birthday, I continued to help him with the garden flowers every day. However, he remained bedridden. Then, one day, something astonishing happened. As I arrived at my husband's parents' house early in the morning, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, with their large suitcases, appeared in front of me. "We'll take good care of him, okay?" I asked, surprised. My mother-in-law replied, "We're off to a week-long trip to Hawaii. It's obvious if you look." "Really? You can be so slow," I said. "I wasn't informed about any trip. There was no need to tell you. After all, you're here every day taking care of my husband." My mother-in-law said, "What about him?" I asked. "He'll be fine if you take care of him. We can't take him along. We're tired of caring for him every day. Don't we even get a break?" My mother-in-law started to get angry. "That's right," chimed in my brother-in-law and his wife. I was flabbergasted, beyond anger. "All right then, safe travels," I said with a thick layer of sarcasm and took the house key from her. "Can't wait for the beach. It's been a while." Ignoring my glaring stare, my mother-in-law and the brother-in-law's family left. Once they were gone, I quickly finished gardening and went into my father-in-law's room. "I'm really sorry, Rachel." His face looked downcast. "No worries. Just rest easy," I told him. I placed a small table next to his bed and laid out his favorite dishes. Then I called my husband, and the three of us had dinner. Despite the circumstances, our lively dinner tasted great and was enjoyable. Suddenly, I noticed my father-in-law, who was sipping his soup, had teary eyes. "Is everything all right? Did something not taste good?" "So worried?" I asked him, to which he quietly replied, "No, it's not that. I'm just very grateful for you. You're really the best daughter-in-law one could hope for." Even though my mother-in-law and brother-in-law's family would always have lively dinners downstairs, my father-in-law would spend his days alone upstairs. Just thinking about it made my heart ache. Since the next day was a day off, my husband and I decided to stay at their house for the night. We had a pleasant chat until my father-in-law fell asleep. The next morning, I was shocked when I saw the garden. My father-in-law was standing there, tending to the flowers. "What are you doing?" they asked. "Good morning, Rachel," he replied. As if nothing had happened, he was gardening. I rushed to call my husband. "Bob, your dad, he's standing up. Come quick!" I exclaimed, my voice high-pitched with surprise. "What are you talking about?" "Dad's bedridden, remember?" My husband rushed to the porch. only to be equally surprised. Wow, what? Seeing our stunned faces, my father-in-law calmly said, "Well, should we go on a spa trip then?" "Huh?" I said, ignoring our surprise. My father-in-law remained composed and asked us to prepare for a one-night trip. In our state of shock, we did as told, went home, packed for a one-night trip, and returned. Sure enough, my father-in-law was still standing, looking very energetic. "Could you drive?" he asked. We headed to a spa inn. Once we settled down, we asked him, "What on earth is happening?" With a grin, my father-in-law confessed, "I'm sorry for deceiving you. I overheard a secret conversation between my wife and Kevin shortly after we started living together. The conversation went something like this: he's going to be bedridden at this rate." "It's really a bother," said my mother-in-law. "Then let's put him in a good facility. He doesn't have much time left. Let's change the ownership of the land and house to us before he passes away. If we get him to write a will, it'll be perfect. As long as we get a considerable portion, that is, he's bedridden. I can convince him easily," said Kevin. "That's a good idea. Once we decide on this, we should act quickly." "Sounds good," agreed Kevin. My father-in-law, who overheard this, knew not only of their plans for after his demise, but also of their vacation to Hawaii. "They're not my family anymore," he thought to himself. And he decided not to leave his land, house, or assets to his wife and Kevin. But to fool them, he decided to pretend to be bedridden and maintained his leg strength by walking around the second floor when no one was around. And so, he had been thinking all along about who to let inherit the estate. My father-in-law said proudly, "I've been feigning bedridden all this time, waiting for the right opportunity. I want you all to inherit my estate." My mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who'd been enjoying a trip to Hawaii, returned home a week later. By that time, my father-in-law had already consulted with a lawyer he had hired in advance and had transferred the ownership of the land and house to my husband. Furthermore, he had finalized a will regarding the inheritance. Then, on the day of their return, my mother-in-law and others were surprised to see my father-in-law walking briskly around. "What's happening?" they exclaimed in astonishment. He told them, "We need to talk about the future. To come to the living room now." He called all the family members into the living room. "Hey, why are you standing?" my mother-in-law asked, shocked. "I've been well for a while. I've been doing physical therapy secretly at night after you all have gone to bed. I've seen through all your plans." "What plans?" My mother-in-law played dumb. "Weren't you trying to put me in a nursing home, make this land and house yours, and make sure you inherit all the estate?" His strong words made his mother-in-law and brother-in-law, Kevin, pale. "Dad, you must be mistaken. I've heard with my own ears the conversation you had with her in my room. There's no mistake. You must have enjoyed the Hawaii trip at the pension I had saved. It's easy to see if you look at the bank book." He glared at them and said, "First of all, about this land and house, I've decided to give them to my eldest son, Bob." He spread the deed on the table. His mother-in-law and Kevin were petrified. "There's more to it." He continued the conversation regardless of their reactions. "I decided to ask Bob and his wife to manage my estate. I've made a will too." "Why?" "No offense, but Bob is just an average worker. We can manage money better. After all, we run a business." Kevin finally interjected, "Managing money is indeed challenging. That's why I've introduced them to a competent lawyer and tax accountant." "But Kevin is superior to Bob in every aspect." He spoke sternly to his persistent mother-in-law. "Kevin, isn't your company on the verge of collapse?" "What? How do you know that?" "I have a friend who is well informed about business matters. Your company is seeking large loans, but you have no hope of repayment, do you?" At my father-in-law's accusation, my brother-in-law, Kevin, started to panic, looking like he might spit up his drink. "You know, the other day, a reporter from the Financial Times came to interview me. He was talking about investments or something like that." My husband responded, laying a business card from the well-known newspaper on the desk. "And that reporter wanted me to tell you, the truth has already been uncovered." "What does that mean, Kevin?" As my father-in-law interrogated him, Kevin seemed to resign himself and confessed, "I really did fail with my investment. I got carried away by a fellow entrepreneur's sweet talk. I rounded up investors and handed the money over to him, and then he disappeared. He ran off with the money. I was planning to sell the real estate I inherited from my dad to cover the debt." He admitted and hung his head in shame. "But Kevin, you promised it would definitely be profitable." "Wanna buy share?" "Wait, you invested too?" My husband threw up his hands in exasperation. "When I heard it was guaranteed to be profitable, I invested $300,000. I told my friends the same story, and they should have invested about $200,000 in total. What? So that's a total of $500,000. I was shocked, following my husband's surprise. Kevin, you call yourself a businessman, and yet you can't even spot a scam like that. I can't entrust my fortune to someone like you. Have some shame. And you, I knew about your $300,000 investment. When you went to Hawaii, I checked all the bank cards in our house. You will have to take responsibility and leave this house? That's too much. This house is all I have. You and Kevin were the ones who took this precious house for granted. Dad, help me out here. Please help. Ignoring their desperate pleas, my father-in-law left the room. Afterwards, my brother-in-law, Kevin, was left scrambling to repay the investment money, and he had to let go of his company. He tried to start another one, but with his reputation completely ruined, he failed. His high and mighty wife couldn't tolerate such a condition, and they soon divorced. The mother-in-law, whom she used to get along with so well, turned hostile due to financial strains, leading to constant quarrels towards the end. My father-in-law and mother-in-law also ended up divorcing at a very old age. When it came to the division of assets during the divorce, the majority of the funds had to be used to repay the investments made to the mother-in-law's friends, leaving them with virtually nothing. Divorced and in a financial pinch, my mother-in-law is getting by with the little money she receives from my father-in-law every month, but all we hear are complaints. She lost her family, money, and is now living alone in loneliness. I ran into her in the neighborhood the other day. She, still as prideful as ever, claims that living alone is comfortable, but her loneliness was clearly showing. As for me and my husband, we decided to live with my father-in-law. I spend my days enjoying gardening with him in our spacious backyard. Furthermore, our son's family welcomed a new member, a girl, which made our family more lively. Above all, seeing my father-in-law so happy is the best. This is because his grandchildren and great-grandchildren come to visit every weekend. When it rains, my father-in-law happily goes for a walk, using the yellow umbrella I gave him. Seeing him like this, I feel content every day.